Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Kingsway podcast. Just going to warn you, this is a two-part episode. So what you're about to watch is a conversation with me and Trevor and my friend Jeremiah talk about Christianity and art and how we should engage it and all those kind of things, how good it is. But this is not the full conversation. So be sure to tune back in a couple weeks at least to catch the last half. And I think you'll really want to catch the last half. We delve into some specific topics about like the value of the genre of horror and other stuff. So enjoy this episode right here, but know that this is not the end of the conversation. Here we go.
Welcome back to the Kingsway podcast.
Welcome.
It's a little bit different in here, Ryan.
Yeah, we really upgraded our room.
Are we under the Wayne mansion right now?
Yes.
That's what I thought. They're in the back cave.
Yeah,
back
exactly.
Cave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you know that? He hasn't told anybody other than me his secret identity.
Funny you
You're just
mention
putting
that.
out on the.
I have a friend that calls me Creative Batman because I have all the small little things that you can use to create whatever.
All the tools.
All the small tools, yeah.
Now, we're going to introduce our guest in a second, but isn't it also true that you do go by Batman?
It's
around the
100%
country.
true, yes. Yep. Anytime I'm at a restaurant, I'd say my name is Batman because it's easy for them to say and it never gets mixed up with my real name. So, yeah.
So we're sitting with Batman under Wayne Manor. See, I told you we were right.
We are in a basement. It is blacked out. If you're just watching or if you're just listening to the audio, it might even sound a little different. I wonder if it's going to sound different after it goes through the same processing stuff, but nobody cared about that statement. Moving on to a new statement.
Well, the fun thing today is like we're going to have a discussion. Maybe, Ryan, you should introduce our guests for those that aren't watching on YouTube that are like, there's a third voice, and I'm not sure who this person is.
We're sitting here
evidently
with
Batman.
Jeremiah Jones, a friend that my wife and I have had for a long time. We started college at the same time, but not at the same age. Non-traditional student when he started.
Correct.
And we've had a friendship for 10 plus years. And like all of the guests we have on this podcast, they know something, and we want to know what they know.
Yes.
So that we can also know that thing.
Give us your knowledge.
So, Jeremiah, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you know something.
Interesting. Okay.
That's a very broad thing that he could choose to go in any direction with.
Well, yeah, my name's Jeremiah Jones. I teach here at Ozark Christian College. I teach in the Creative Arts Department in the areas of guitar and podcasting. And I'm also the Assistant Director of Digital Learning, which means I am the sole advisor for all of our undergraduate online students, a little bit over 70 students that I'm in charge of, which is quite the task, but it's fun. Great.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's
crazy sometimes.
You've told me about this before, that you're not just in charge of 70 students overall. You're like moderating or whatever the term is, all of their classes or a bunch of their classes.
Yeah. Always keeping tabs on our students to make sure they're doing well in classes. And then if they're not, making sure I'm contacting them. Hey, is everything okay? Is there something that we can help you with to get you back on track?
How long has that position existed here?
For a while.
How old is the internet?
I wasn't here when I was here. That's what I was trying
to good solid online program. So I would say about 5 years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense.
5 years like this.
Yes. It's shifted. The program has shifted a lot.
I graduated in 2010. So I was like, that was not here.
Yeah. Probably not in 2010.
Yeah.
I think we didn't get Canvas here, which is our learning management system, until we were like a sophomore.
So the internet existed.
It's been a while.
But we were still on like a tricycle version.
Yeah. Last night I was at a friend's house and we were playing games, and it was a charadesy kind of game, just one. So they're all giving one-word clues and trying to get you to say a word. And some of the clues were Bob and Ross. Two separate people collaborated to write Bob Ross, and painting and whatever. But Sharon, my wife, wrote in structure. I was like, Canvas.
That's hilarious.
Anyway.
Nerdy jokes.
Yep. Okay. Hopefully you get that. But if you didn't go to school in the past 10 years, you may not get that. So
I didn't go to school.
But Jeremiah does all that stuff at Ozark. On top of that, he has some education and some smart friends.
Sure.
That can maybe tell us something about something.
Well, I think he's passionate about it too.
And he's passionate
I
about
was
it.
going to say, very passionate about it. You got a stack of books here that look very, very important.
Yeah.
So if you're watching online, you need to know.
It's just really to make me look good. But,
I'm fine with that. I've been known to do that.
Right. Well, I've been kind of a leader in the arts community of Joplin for a while now. Helped kind of manage a group called the Limner Society here in the Joplin area, which is just a bunch of artists that
sounds very made up. That's what this is.
It's very underground, like Batman.
I was going to say it sounds very made up, but I believe it's true. But so what is it? What do you guys do? Is it art walk and like some of that stuff?
Yeah. So like all that kind of stuff that started here in Joplin was started by people in our group. A lot of the murals that you see around downtown have been created by people in our group. So just it's just a really big creative community here in Joplin, and it's very Christian focused, but we're not like exclusive to that, so we have some non-Christians that come as well. And it's just, it's been a great group to be a part of. And my wife and I love being a part of that and going to the retreats that we do and being a part of all the events and everything. So
I guess our discussion is basically going to be around, how does the art work with the Bible? Is art in contradiction sometimes to what the Bible would want? How obviously the Bible encourages certain forms of art at times, but maybe doesn't have, like, I don't remember too many verses about painting or sculpturing,
right.
But he's the clay maker, like there's, he's the clay
maker.
So he's the sculptor. I guess there's parts of that. I guess what I want to ask, and maybe to launch our discussion, is I think even at a very general level, anybody that's followed Christianity as a movement recognizes that there are massive displays of, I would call, faith expressions through art. And we all know that Sixtine Chapel and, the Last Supper, some of these like very famous paintings flowed from, I guess, maybe a desire, but also an impact that some of these non-visual scenes from the Bible then are being depicted.
I saw that in the Olympics.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And even a world that I would say doesn't necessarily always agree with what the Bible says, even I think thought, that might not have been in perfect taste. And we don't know if that was also a Greek display.
Sure.
Also. So it could have been that. And obviously we can go as far back as you want into the art has been a part of, from the beginning, cave drawings. This is obviously something that's going to occur even outside of the biblical narrative.
Right.
So when you think about art, like, what are the things that you feel like make this difficult to talk about? What are the things that you feel like are helpful and like this is actually something worthy of a conversation? Is there a particular reason why you lean in, other than just obviously your giftings being a music teacher and
What makes you love art?
I feel like art is how we express meaning into the world, or we create meaning into the world. Even if we're talking about, hieroglyphs or like, signs, ancient signs, all these things that we've had from the beginning, they presented a picture for people, right? Like they have meaning behind them, and it was different for that context than it is even today. Like we can interpret that in different contexts in different ways as well. So that's what I love about semiotics, which is like the study of signs and symbols, is because it's semiotics that brings meaning into the world, because you're looking at the symbol and you're trying to discern, well, what does this mean for me right now? What did it mean then? And how can we maybe reinterpret this idea and push forward into the future to present new meaning? Or maybe we want to carry on this old meaning because we feel like it was very useful.
That's really interesting. We have one of my favorite sermons ever was by Andy Stanley, and it's still one that I think about quite often, is he says there's a cross over the Emperor's Gate in the Colosseum. And he talks about, and that cross is not a Roman cross anymore. And it's a cross of hope.
Yeah.
And then he just takes you all the way back to what the cross meant versus now it being in the Colosseum over the Emperor's Gate, but it means something completely different. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's wild, because this was an instrument of torture, of domination, of fear. And now it's become the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And it's been reclaimed or restored.
Yeah. So I know from my own experience growing up, it felt like the conversations that we had in our church, maybe not from a pulpit, but like pew to pew, the conversations we had before and after church, conversations I had with my family about art weren't usually like, isn't this impactful? They were usually like, that art is dangerous, this art is dangerous. and this art is safe.
Yeah.
Talk to us about like maybe ways that Christians have or could engage art, but then what you think is like a healthy way for a Christian to engage art.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've seen that recently with a bunch of book burnings and you know, those sort of things where we see something that might not sit well with us from our standpoint or our kind of our viewpoint of the world, and we don't know what to do with it. Where our normal reaction is just to get rid of it, right? Where that might not always be the most helpful thing, because we can learn from things that we disagree with. We can learn from people that we don't agree with, right? We can still be friends and still take that for what it's worth. And I think that's the beautiful thing about art is that, we might not see the same thing from this one thing, but it doesn't mean that it's not useful for society or for us to even observe and to think about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I constantly think about this topic in the sense of like, there's a couple different movies, but just to save time, like the idea that someone can write about a sunset and they can write beautiful poetry and they can do an amazing job of pulling out the depth of what a sunset can be. Someone else can paint a picture and it can do the same thing, right? It takes what I feel like is length and makes it width. A lot of times it brings depth almost to something. And then someone can take a picture and it can do the exact same thing, or the right filter, or the right light. You know, they accent what is already there, but bring depth to it. Is art in your mind the patience of taking time to see the depth of life rather than just the length or time passing? Is this the pause button of the heart? It'd be something to think about.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly an aspect of it that touches on that for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's art allows you to give it as much meaning as you want. You know, it can be as deep as you want it to be. It can be as surface level as you want it to be, and it'll impact you depending on the season that you're in. You know, like depends on what's going on in your life or what's going on in the world. Like there's so much that can change. You know, but the piece of art doesn't. Yeah, you know. It's your situation that changes around what's presented, and
your heart, your hands, your thoughts, everything. Yeah.
And then you take meaning from it to help you through whatever you might be going through, or you know what you're trying to make sense of in the world today. And that's what's so beautiful about it. Yeah.
This is, I guess that's what's giving me some thoughts of like, is this a natural way that we've kind of lost? Journaling, poetry, even writing down how we feel about things, you know, autobiographies, slowing down, painting, drawing. There's a certain part of this that I wonder if it isn't just expression, but actually like a medicine of the soul in some ways. Obviously, the art that sometimes we read is not always from the perfect place, like you're saying. Sometimes an artist writes something out of deep pain. Yeah. Or paints something that's tragic, but that now is, you know, something now we look back and we go, it was amazing for you to capture that, even though the pain of that moment. Yeah. I just wonder if it isn't us just not rushing through something, but feeling it, you know, maybe where we're at and slowing down enough to express how we really feel. Yeah. Does that feel like that like, I feel like that personifies a lot of what I feel like oftentimes we miss in art.
Yeah, to be an observer art is to sit and to be still with it, right? Like you can't just glance at it and get everything that it's trying to tell you, right? Yeah. You definitely need to sit with it and to observe and kind of go into that maybe deeper part of yourself, not necessarily express what's the deep part of the painting, but what is it pulling out of yourself when you look at this thing? Which is a great moment of self-reflection, and I think that's why it's so impactful for a lot of people.
Yeah. I've talked to people about this before, but one of the reasons that I struggled with the New Testament epistles for a while compared to the rest of the Bible is that they would say things so plainly and it was so uninspiring to me. Sorry, Paul and Peter and
very direct.
Apollos for Hebrews, I'm guessing. But like they would just be like, hey, be faithful to your wife, or be faithful to God or whatever. But then I would go back to the Old Testament, and usually I'd find a story about that was super compelling. Hosea, David and Bathsheba, First Samuel, 2 Samuel,
1 Samuel,
11, 1 Samuel 11. Some of these other stories that, like, in story format, really like wrenched my heart, and it took me a while to realize why. Because I was like, shouldn't the New Testament have the perfect version of that imperfect Old Testament time talking about that same thing? Yeah. But yeah, I think like those stories, even though they're ancient, made a lot more impact than like, hey, don't do this.
Well, and so much of the Psalms are that language that you're talking about. Like, where's the New Testament Psalms? Like you get a little of that from Paul in like 2 Corinthians, where he starts to like be almost broken down a little bit, and he's trying to, talk about his feelings a little bit more, not just about what other people should do, but his own struggle. And you feel like he's kind of writing a few Psalms in there, even like that 12 where he's like, my grace is sufficient. That sounds very psalmy. Like you could take that out. But the Psalms itself, I was literally walked into one of the classrooms over here, and they had Psalm 119:20, which is, my bones fear you. I fear your judgment. And that was the only thing on the board. And I was like, yee. I don't know what they did, but yee. But my first thought was, is that Psalm supposed to be read as like you should? Or is that Psalm supposed to be just read as that's how I feel right now, whether that's how God truly feels or wants me to feel? Is that just how that psalmist felt in the moment? Or is that trying to declare that's how you should feel? And I'm like, no, I don't think that's a declaration of how I should feel. That's just, I have felt that way too.
Yeah.
And so you find yourself in the art.
It makes it makes it relatable, right? Because sometimes we feel distant from these, people in the Bible that were portrayed. Where when we see things like that, like all these imprecatory Psalms, like, we've had those moments in our life where we just want to destroy our enemies because of all the terrible things that are happening. But then it always comes back to that repentant heart. Yeah. And in both cases, we can relate. Yeah. It makes it more human, which is hard.
Yeah. We've had moments even in our culture, I think in the last year, where North of Richmond by Oliver, that song, Men North of Richmond. I felt like that song hit the artistic like chord of where a lot of the country was. Yeah. I'm just talking about how the government has just become something everyone's struggling to trust. And I'm not trying to speak to where you're at. I'm just saying when that song came out, he had one guitar, like a GoPro and like no equipment, and threw it on one platform. And it connected with so many people so fast that this recovering alcoholic who would openly admit that would tell you, I don't know, I was just singing something that was deep inside of me, conviction, and it just immediately connects. And it's through art. Yeah. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a political platform. It was just heart language.
Well, and sorry to all you preachers out there, but it's kind of the same way in the church too, where a song is more so to be carried on somebody's mind and heart than what was preached on a Sunday morning. So,
which the song, the music behind it, the rhythm, the repetition, the rhyming, didn't mean to alliterate all that. It's the stuff that makes that message that you're singing sticky. In the same way that for preachers, personal stories or Bible stories told in a narrative way, rather than just an expositional way or a dry reading or whatever, can be sticky as well, where like it stays with you throughout the week.
That's the art in it.
Exactly. That's why I loved Creative Arts Academy this past summer, which is an Ozark Christian College high school age camp thing that happens. And that's where we're at right now. We didn't say that. We're not in the Bat Cave. Or we are in the Bat Cave and it exists at Ozark Christian College. The Matt Cave? Matt Stafford? Anyway, but I heard the people who do Holy Ghost stories, the lady, the husband, what? Gerhard's?
Yeah, Gerhard's.
There we go.
Yep.
Got it.
Good job.
She taught and she was teaching about art, and I think I totally lost what she was saying now that I explained it so long. Yep, totally lost it. It was really valuable, and it would have been great in this conversation.
I'm sure it will come back in just a couple minutes.
The moment I say it, I'm going to interrupt somebody and say it.
It has something to do with darkness and how I remember what you're talking about.
She said something. Oh no, She was talking about Jesus' parables.
Yes.
And
yes.
why he taught in parables. And it's because, like we were just saying for preachers, like they're sticky, more sticky than just like principles. And they were sticky because she had 3 points about it, but it was pretty much like, it's a story. It's exposing the human heart, and you can all relate to that. Anyway.
It's part of the reason why I think country music will always be around, or folk music, because it attaches to that storyboard, type of thing.
Or rap music even.
Or rap. Yeah. Rap is the same flow, absolutely. Because like Corey Asbury's new album, Pioneer, it has several songs in there that they're not new thoughts by any means, but the way that he writes them and talks about them and puts them into story form he's got a song that's called Everything Belongs.
Yeah.
And you see,
good.
We're jamming.
It's a great one.
We go. And it's just the thought that like heartbreak writes the love songs. Like if the young man writes for praises, the old man writes for fun. Like there's a different understanding of the world, and each perspective is worthy and welcome, but you can't weigh one over the other. And I think that's part of growing up and getting a little older is, you do stop and smell the roses just a little bit easier. And I think there's a famous guy, and maybe you'll know, it's the 60s motto was the world just needs love, right? But anarchy is stopped by art, I think is the quote. It's anarchy is paused or stopped by art. And it's when men stop to experience and remember the bigger things that things slow down enough to stop the rush.
Yeah.
Here's my big question, and here's what I would, sometimes when people listen to a podcast like this, they start to get in their feels, and they're like, cool, so we're just going to sit and draw pictures and wait for Jesus to come back.
Well, I was going to make a point to what you were just saying, like when COVID happened, like how much art came out of that moment, because we were all cooped up in our homes, and we had to try to find a way
this
to
podcast.
Exactly.
This podcast did start.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I mean, I think that's an important point. It's like we did as a nation, as a world, had to take a moment back and observe, and there was just so much that came out of that.
And not a lot of people came out of that great because they didn't like what they found.
Exactly.
This may be cheesy, but one of my favorite, I don't know if you would fully consider it art, but it is like a communicative medium, was during COVID, John Krasinski and the like Only Good News, whatever that was.
That was so good.
I think he had a different name. That was so, it wasn't just a dry sharing, retweeting, whatever of good stories. It was like the kid drawing of the logo and his suit, but then like athletic shorts.
Yeah.
And like the whole story that the thing told was it was a world. It wasn't just news stories that was being shared. And I remember that like stuck with me more than a lot of the art from that moment. And it was funny because in the 1900s, early 1900s, all of the greatest minds in the entire world were signing up to work for weapons manufacturers because of World War I, World War II. So Albert Einstein coming from Germany to the U.S. and helping us build a nuclear bomb, an atomic bomb. That is where the greatest minds were going. Well, in the very end of the 1900s and early 2000s, all of the greatest minds are going to entertainment and to they work at Apple and in Silicon Valley and for Hollywood and all this kind of stuff. What that makes me think of immediately is like movies. But the shutdown of movies coming out in 2020, like I watched movies be replaced. That's when Tenet came out, and I loved Tenet. But it was like Tenet was done, and they were just waiting to release it, and then they did. So it wasn't like movies, like movie making became a great art in some massive Hollywood level. But all these little things were coming out from YouTube and people's stories and whatever. It was just a really interesting moment watching the patriarchy is not the right word, but the hierarchy of digital media, which was already being upset as we saw through music, like Napster and SoundCloud, whatever, pushing artists to the top without a record label saying, we want you to be at the top. Like we kind of watched that same thing happen crest a hill in 2020 with like videos and stuff like that, where people weren't putting something out through movie theaters for people to watch in person.
Yeah.
And that whole Disney Plus thing happened where
Yeah.
Scarlett was really upset that her earnings were lost because it came out just on streaming and not on.
Yeah.
That was a big moment for art.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it was changing in many layers. You know, being a gamer in 2020, it was actually 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
Xbox broke off of a mold with PS5 and with home PCs, and every gaming platform just played nice.
Yeah.
And so for the first 20 years of those existing, you had to either pick a brand and pick a side, and now all of a sudden everybody can play together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So gaming had this like literal revolution where like every friend you couldn't play with now you can play with, and every person, no matter if they're a low ecom horrible PC or a brand new Xbox or the 10-year-old PS4, they can all play together. And it changed the landscape. You no longer were ostracized because you couldn't afford the newest best thing. You had a chance
Unless you
to
had a
play.
Switch.
Well, Switches even now. You can play with Switch.
You can.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I mean,
you
it
can.
was wild how that changed even the gaming experience for me, because my kids would ask constantly, you know, well, they're not on Xbox. And I'd be like, well, they can play with us anyway. And so the gaming world just blew up. I mean, you
Yeah.
want to talk about some of the brightest minds. Fortnite, still probably the most
Yeah.
underestimated amount of money that a game made
Yeah.
without ever selling itself once.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and they have now allowed people to build things within their
Yes.
platform.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which-
Yeah.
and sell their games that they're
Yeah.
creating for people to play within that, which is even more of a
Well, in
user
Roblox,
experience, you
I don't know if you know what Roblox is. That's like Minecraft met Lego made Grand Theft Auto. It's literally like all those games combined, but it's like Minecraft, graphics. But I've just been learning about that. They estimated in COVID, 3 out of 5 kids between 9 and 14 were playing that game every day.
wow.
I'm like, what? I mean, and it is. It's like digital Legos meets open world meets.
Yeah.
And, so that's going on while, what I would say my childhood dreams was seeing a movie open at midnight.
Yeah.
And like wanting to go make sure that I saw the movie on Friday that everybody was going to go see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My kids don't even ask that. They just want a new skin on their Minecraft character.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't deserve it.
And I'm like,
We
You
just
didn't
wait
earn
until
the
it comes out
$6.
on Disney Plus
Oh,
now.
dude.
Yeah.
You
Oh
don't
my
even go to the
God.
theaters much anymore.
We
we don't.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a little bit about art, but then how Christians should engage art.
Yeah.
The past 5 minutes we've been talking about like mass market entertainment kind of art. So all the greatest minds, they aren't going to making the deepest art. They're going to making the art that makes the most profit or is the most addicting or something like that.
Mhm.
So video games and stuff like that, how they've figured out how to push our buttons and the reward system in our brain
Yeah.
to make us so enamored with seeing, this is going to be a 15-year-old comment, but seeing the achievement unlocked thing at the top of the screen, like that reward system in our brains. How should from your perspective, from your reading and study and whatever, how should a Christian engage some of this art that is specifically entertainment and sometimes made to be addictive or to be like, you want to binge playing this game or watching this thing?
I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
I think, it definitely plays into, do you have an addictive personality or not? You might have to maybe be a little bit more self-controlled with the way that you're watching or consuming this kind of media. But in general, I don't think that Christians should stir away from any kind of video game material unless it's obvious, like Grand Theft Auto. Like that's probably not the most, Christian thing you should be engaging with.
Yeah.
But you can still respect like the amount of work that went into creating that game, all the
wild.
artistry that had to go into creating, generating.
Cyberpunk,
Yeah.
wild games.
There's a lot to appreciate behind the art form, but you might not necessarily appreciate the art itself.
Yeah. So like if I do play Grand Theft Auto, obey all traffic laws, respect women.
Don't shoot cops.
Don't-
shoot
yeah,
cops, right? Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have like probably in the past 5-10 years, no, probably in the past 1 or 2 years, seen a lot more of the art that can go into video games, especially shout out to Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes.
Both of those are such beautiful
They are,
games.
yeah.
I don't even know what to say about it after that.
No, that's again, I have a thing that I want to get to, and I don't want to cut this conversation off, but I really think there's a part of this that I was alluding to it a little earlier, but when we talk about art, there is definitely going to be a good group of people that just think, cool, so these are the guys that like to jam on the drums and get their guitar, and they just want an excuse to go out to the garage and be able to do their art, and because it makes them feel good. And so all the guys that are like, well, I want to do that with my golf clubs, okay? And so like, what's the difference? And like, you can justify it so it's a better, deeper, greater thing. And I don't know. I lean into this to say, where does this become? Because like if I watched Michael Jordan play back in the day, it felt artful. It felt like an art.
100%.
It felt like something that he was built to do, made to do. But I also know that didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so art has this moment. Here's the question, or here's the thought for just a few minutes. Like, at what point does art become an obsession that has diminishing returns? And at what point does art become something we have to lean into because we're missing maybe what's the depth, or, it's like a life without art. Can you even imagine that? How horrible, the cover art of these books, the way the cans and the way your car, I mean, you can't go hardly anywhere without art. So there seems to be a balance somewhere in there where you don't want to just be the guy that just is homeless playing his guitar on the side of the street because that's all he cares about.
Yeah.
I don't know. Thought of that.
Yeah, that's a great thought. So another group that I help lead is the Art Collective here at the college, which is just our college students here at Ozark Christian College that are into art. They don't necessarily have to be good at it, but if they're great observers of it or just enjoy being around it. And that's kind of the hard thing that we've been dealing with, is how do we present this to our congregation? Because we don't have a whole lot of people that show up for these meetings, and they think we're just kind of sitting around, looking at a piece of art and talking about it or playing our guitars or, kind of the things you're saying. And I think it comes down to recognizing, God is a creative God in the beginning.
100%.
He created everything out of nothing. Like, I've been thinking about that specific idea for a while now, that it was God's aseity, his divine aseity. So meaning that he didn't have anything pre-existing to create anything from. God actually created himself, essentially, right? And so in that, like, it's that constant creating out of, like, God created something out of nothing, and then he created, woman out of man. And it's just this constant repetition of out of something. So I don't think that we can naturally live in a world that's not of artistic value or artistic beauty, because everything presents in some way. Well, not everything, I shouldn't say that, but truth, goodness, and beauty are very present in our world. And to just say that those things don't exist is to say that God doesn't exist, So, and so with that, if we think about how we kind of interact in that way, is that God presented all of these things for us to take now and to create and to make something. We don't create something out of nothing, but we create something out of the things that are here now. And that's how we kind of connect to the vine in some way, is because we have this aspect, but that's what separates us from God, is that he did it out of nothing. We do it out of something that he created, So we do connect to God in everything that we make, everything that's here.
Yeah.
So even if it's not some formally recognized art form, like, everybody is engaging in creation.
Yes, I would say that.
So for the person who doesn't play the guitar and doesn't own a Bob Ross painting kit, like, you can still be a part of creation and art, even in your conversations with friends, just by sharing what's been impactful. And you're creating that idea in somebody else's life, or whatever. Anything can be done artfully, even artistically, even like how you're talking about Michael Jordan. Yeah. That's sport, but he played sport like art. I don't know how to say that any different.
No, and I'm trying to just sit here and like digest this. I think when when fight or flight hits, art becomes not hopeful anymore, right? Like when life or death seems to be at risk. But I wonder if it's not the first sign of life.
If art is
like,
the reason.
See how that like would be like a cool thought that it's like once fight or flight drops, art's the first thing to emerge.
Yeah.
Like expression. Like,
is art the thing that separates us from the other animals?
That's what I'm trying to. I think it's when he impresses or breathes in. I think that's the thing that intuitively we do. If I have time, I love to cook, and I love to cook something delicious. Right. But if I don't have the time, I'll just slam a peanut butter sandwich or you know what I mean. Like you know what I mean. So it in my mind, it's as simple as that. Sometimes I think art is just being delicate. Sometimes I think art is being in the moment. Sometimes I think art is being present, you know, just being present in the sunset, but being present with a friend. It's also recognizing the moment like a sport to take advantage of the skills you have.
Yeah, well, art can be aggressive, right? Like you're getting something out of yourself and presenting yourself in a way that's not normal.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Kingsway Podcast. Remember, we are coming back next week with another episode to finish this conversation with my friend Jeremiah. And it's going to be a really good one, so you don't want to miss it. Well, we didn't say it in the episode because we cut halfway through. So have a great and glorious day in the Lord. See you later.